Just before we get started, guys, don't forget I am giving away an Honor Play 64GB phone, 4GB of RAM, color in midnight black, unopened, completely sealed in its original box, and I'll be shipping it worldwide. The link to the giveaway is in the description below. I'll also post it in the top comment that I'll have pinned to the comment section. Enter, enjoy, and good luck. Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and today we're going to be covering the top 5 picks for every single role in 5v5 on Update 3.10. Yes, Vainglory Update 3.10 brought a lot of new changes, did shift things around a little bit. There'll be some familiar faces and some new faces, and hopefully I'll get the majority of them in the kind of ballpark for your particular server. I do want to add a caveat: most of these are from European server meta, because that's where I play, so things might change between SEA and North America and South America and East Asia and stuff. But let's begin with mid laner. So let's start with Magnus. Magnus is still really strong, got a small buff realistically on update 3.10. You can see his build path and kind of what I suggest in terms of items. Now, you do not have to stick to these items and this build path. Obviously, everything is situational and you can alter things as you see fit. There might be situations where you might want to overdrive something else. There might be situations where you want to change the build path up slightly. And let's have a look at Celeste. Now, Celeste is strong post level 8. She is fairly weak in the laning phase, especially if you aren't using her basic attacks to their fullest. That is the build path that most people have been playing in terms of the 5 core items with the Halcyon Charger second. Something that you will notice across most of the mid laners is that we have a Halcyon Charger second item. We've actually seen some people even in Southeast Asia and East Asia going Halcyon Chargers first, but I do like to complete my first tier 3 item before going Halcyon Chargers. They're a really good rounded item. They give you a consistent escape and engage tool, and also give you a bit of cooldown reduction and energy regeneration. Maline's build path slightly changed up. The flat CP from Shatterglass Flares is a really good boon, and you do like to have that extra cooldown reduction coming through from the clockwork. Samuel is someone who's kind of just on the outside of those top 3. Top 4 even, if we consider the next pick, but he is still really strong. Build path for Spellfire, Halcyon Chargers, Dragon's Eye into Broken Myth, the Even Harvest, and again, alternate CP items to consider, things like Clockwork and Frostburn, depending on the situation. You might want to spam your A a bit more, you might want to get a bit of utility from the Frostburn. And finally, Scarf. Scarf got a bit of a change in 3.10, kind of a bit of a damage nerf, but then also massively buffed his ultimate and buffed the range on his A, making Scarf a really viable pick in the mid lane right now. So our 5 picks in the mid lane are Magnus, Celeste, Maline, Samuel, and Scarf, all of which are really strong. They have different matchups into each other. For instance, Scarf is good into Celeste because of the range discrepancy in the early game, but those are the 5 that I would concentrate on if you're a mid laner. Alright, let's take a look at the top lane. And top lane is starting to ease off and become a bit easier. You don't have to play full utility in the top lane anymore. You can play something a bit more aggressive. And of course, top lane and bot lane are a little bit like synonymous. They swap a little bit between each other at this point in time. So we're going to start off with Jewel. Now, you'll notice Jewel probably pops up a couple of times in this particular tier list. That's because Jewel is probably the best hero in Vainglory right now, just in terms of what she can do. She's really strong. Her CP build path is obnoxious. Even seen people like one of the East Asia top laners or Southeast Asia top laners playing him as Serpent's Mask full tank. It was incredible to watch. I can't quite remember off the top of my head who it was. But Jewel is super strong right now. That build path that you see laid out there is a pretty solid one to follow. Adagio in the top lane has got several build paths to consider. The build path that you see with the Spell Sword into utility is basically replacing Storm Crown for Spell Sword and then going into a similar build that you would have done before. Or you can go full CP like you see below. And the build path will change in terms of levels on his abilities very wildly depending on what you want to achieve. So don't take the one that I've given you as a complete fact that is applied to every situation, because Adagio's build path on levels does change depending on what you want. One thing you might be noting here is you don't need to build Stormcrown in top lane anymore. So if you're playing a top laner, there's no need to go Stormguard banner because it's not as effective versus minions in the lane. And unless you're planning on stealing your own jungle or stealing the enemy's jungle, there really is just no point going Stormguard banner. And you're better off spending that gold in your core items. And this is Lance. I think Lance is in a really strong position, as well as Grace. And you'll notice their build paths are very similar. That's because that core of Serpent's Mask Tension Bow is just a really solid bruiser top laner build. And then you're going to need to go into some defense as these types of heroes unless you are snowballing like crazy. You can add in the extra weapon power of a Sorrow Blade, but I wouldn't go like too far down the Breaking Point Bone Sword build path, especially with Lance, who doesn't scale very well with attack speed. But yeah, this is these guys just really solid top lane beefy bruisers, and I would consider using them as much as you can. Lorelei also. Lorelei did get nerfed on the CP side of things, but she's still an incredible utility top laner. So you can play her CP, but she has been slightly nerfed. The utility build path that my friend Binny suggested to me, who has helped me with this tier list a lot, or rather just picking these heroes in general, is Shatterglass into a similar utility build that Adagio has. So the Shatterglass will replace the spell sword that Adagio goes for first, and then you go for the rest of that utility build. I would personally play Lorelei more utility focused in the top lane, unless you're really confident that you can just crush your lane opponent, and then maybe go into CP to snowball. Kind of up to you, depends. You guys will know what you feel is best as Lorelei players, and that's my personal opinion on the matter. Alright, now going into weapon power carries. Despite the nerfs, Kinetic is still really strong. She runs with that core build of Sorrowblade, Poison Shift, Bonesaw. She's super mobile, and you can add in extra additional weapon power like the Breaking Point or the Tornado Trigger, depending on the situation, or you can go for a double defensive item. But Kinetic is still really good scaling, and generally quite mobile and hard to track down, so she's still a strong weapon power carry in the bot lane. Vox has gone from CP mid laner to weapon power bot laner, has got a couple of builds that I think have worked. He's back into that weapon power meta. The Sorrowblade Poison Shield Bonesaw build that works on Kinetic works very well on Vox too. Another build that has kind of floated a little bit back towards the meta is the Poison Shield Tension Bow Breaking Point build, something that I've seen Hundor playing a little bit, and again it's worth testing out if you guys want to. But yeah, Vox is actually a pretty solid bot laner. He's not as strong as he once was, that's for sure. He really isn't up there in terms of tier listing, but he's definitely top 5 and dependable and fits most compositions, which is what this list kind of tries to get across. Someone that you might be surprised to see, or not, depending if you read the patch notes, is Baron. Baron is well and truly back. He's still got a bit of a rough early game, but he scales really nicely into the late game. Although his range isn't as long, he still hits really hard, and that's why that double turrets monocle tension bow build has kind of floated back. Probably the most popular weapon power bot laner that you see in solo queue right now is Gwen. For good reason. The build that I've listed here has really high damage output and actually scales quite well too. The fact that her perk comes up more regularly now as well is really important. She's got a lot of on-hit burst damage, which also generates a lot of breaking point stacks immediately. So Gwen is in a really strong position, and this 4 core item build works really well with her. Now, this was a bit of a tough one. A lot of people will say, well, where's Silvernail? I just think Silvernail's been nerfed quite heavily. I think he's probably still very good and would be on this list if there were 6 slots, but the most popular solo queue weapon power carry that I'm seeing is Ringo, and he's very versatile in his build path. You can build him the traditional one with the Sorrowblade, Poison Shift, Bonesaw, or you can go for that Gwen build path, which actually has got really high damage output as well. So I think Ringo's just a really solid weapon power carry choice right now, and those are my top 5 weapon power carries. Alright, let's move on to the jungle. The jungle is an interesting one because it got changed pretty significantly in 3.10. It's now no longer about sharing the jungle, it's about being that solo jungle carry. And just as you might have thought, Jewel is an incredible jungler right now. Gotta start with Stormguard Banner in most cases. It helps you clear really quickly. And the build path is very similar to the one that I listed, or actually it's identical to the one that I listed coming out of the top lane. But Jewel is just so strong. I actually prefer playing her in jungle than I do playing her in top lane because it's less risky and you don't get punished as much. But your gold income will be slightly reduced, so you might not hit those power points as regularly. Something that I've been raving about, and I think most pro players have been really enjoying playing as well, is Rhyme in the jungle. Now, I missed this off when I did my patch notes review because I was kind of going through it a bit too quickly. Need to slow down next time. I was a little bit conscious about the length of the video. The fact is that you can just run up to someone and root them with your B immediately. And that just changes the way that Rhyme plays. You no longer need to get a basic attack on them. You no longer need to hit your A. You can literally just run up to them and use your B. And it's just a really powerful way of starting ganks, setting up team fights, and just making sure you guarantee your damage hits, because you can go B into immediate Valkyrie into your A, and suddenly just there's a world of hurt on your opponent. Weapon Power Attacker is really solid in the jungle. I think he's amazing. You've seen a lot of videos from myself and other content creators about Weapon Power Attacker. Just take a look at the couple of the builds. My one there with a bit of a variation build with the core build 1. I included TTigers build that he used in his video as well for you guys to check out. I think Weapon Power Attacker is really good. Also, if you watch Starboy stream, he will tell you that he thinks CP Attacker is still really viable. I haven't played enough of CP Attacker to see whether he's good or not, but you guys let me know. If you've played CP Attacker and you think he's still good, let me know in the comments. Reza. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me on this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do think Reza is a really solid jungler. He's got a lot of burst potential, and as long as you play him differently to the way that you used to play him, I think Reza is really powerful. I might go into that towards the end of the video, but I just think Reza is in a good position, and I think he is a solid jungler that's got a lot of burst potential, especially during his ultimate. Alright, talking about Glaive. I like Glaive as a jungler. I've always liked Glaive as a jungler. He kind of has all the kit that a jungler needs, and the Afterburn is the perfect ganking tool. And I think if this build that you follow here, it's one from my friend Boff, you can have a bit of variation as well towards the end on your third item. You've got a lot of sustained potential, a lot of damage potential in team fights. I just think Glaive can be really strong. Alright, Captain, finally going towards this final role. We've covered almost every role now, upgraded this list to 5 heroes in every role as well, and we're going to do a full tier list towards the end of this week also, maybe when I'm back from skiing next week, but I'm trying to get it done tomorrow so we have our full tier list ready to go. I am repeating a couple of heroes in the tier list because they are just that strong right now, and Lorelei is definitely one of those captains. Despite the nerfs, Lorelei is still obnoxious, still very difficult to deal with, has excellent utility. The free reflex block on her ultimate just makes her invaluable, as well as the fact that she's got great zone control. Despite the fact they've changed the way her stun works, they've elongated it a little bit, she's just she's still just a super strong captain, and I definitely think one of the absolute priority picks in the captain role right now. Yates, he's got great lane presence, he's very good at putting pressure on squishy mages in lane, has great map presence with his ultimate, in general is a great team fight presence as well. I've said presence about 70 times, but regardless, that's what the Yates is. He is presence, and he does his job very well. Lyra got some significant buffs on 3.10. Her healing is actually really, really good, and her Bright Bulwark buff as well really just offset the nerf to her ultimate, which really wasn't that big of a nerf anyway. Her Arcane Passage was really just a good way of getting over walls or disengaging or engaging a fight, but this now gives her a lot of lane sustain and a lot of zone control with the Bright Bulwark. I think Lyra is in a really strong position in the current meta. Arden finally moving away from a captain role, although I have seen some CP Arden top lane and some CP Arden jungle, which has been interesting with Aftershock, but I think he's most suited to captain at this point in time, maxing your ult, maxing your A, and in general just does what he did previously before he was becoming this crazy weapon power carry that everybody seemed to want to play. So yeah, I think Arden right now is just a really good pick in almost every situation. Churnwalker as well. It's really hard to escape this Cheney boy. He just does a lot of, so he does a lot in lane. A lot of lane presence, great teamfight potential, does require a bit to set up, but if you can get him rolling, he's very, very hard to escape and very hard to deal with, especially as a very squishy mage. Comboing with Celeste, for instance, he can just put huge pressure on the enemy laner. And yeah, so I think Churnwalker, you might be asking, where's Finn? Finn just is getting bullied by a lot of the mages in the meta right now, and it's very difficult for Finn to survive in lane, as well as the fact that Finn was never good at dealing with jungle presence either. I think that one of the reasons that Finn was so good previous to this update was because that he was able to sit in the lane by himself with very, very little fear of the jungler ganking him. But you can poke him down quite considerably, and then he becomes quite vulnerable in the early game to jungle ganks, which I think makes him slightly less meta. Don't get me wrong, he's still good. Would have been top 6, I think. But he makes him slightly less meta than he was before. Anyway, guys, if you have any questions, in the comments below. I will see you soon.